Okay, so a very good evening, guys. Can you all let me know if you all can hear me and see a screen? Yes. All good? Good. Right. Today, guys, we'll start with the essay questions from this area called market equilibrium. So this is the last part of unit number 2. So far in unit number 2, we have completed demand, we have completed supply, and now the third or the last one, that is market equilibrium. So I have separated it into 3 parts. Today, we can finish off all the market equilibrium related questions. And then next class, we can move into unit number 3. So I will send you the unit 3 past papers also over the weekend. We can get that done. So unit 3, hopefully in around 3 weeks, we should be able to finish off. So let me share the screen and let's get started. Did you all try the questions out, Lamai? We'll do the essay questions and the MCQs both. Yes, did the questions. Not bad. Okay. So as usual, just a little bit of a context on what's happening around in the country, around in the world. I added a few cartoons to explain that to y'all. One is on the minimum wages. So government has increased the minimum wage to a 27,000 a month. So with the cost of living and all of that increasing, they have actually increased the minimum wage to a 27,000. So now going forward, the minimum that you can earn per month is a 27,000. But what does the cartoon show you? Even though the minimum wage has actually increased, the cost of living is much, much more higher than this. Remember, we talked about this in unit number 11 and 12. In unit number 11 and 12, when we talked about poverty, Lamai, how many of you all remember how much was the national poverty index? How much was that minimum that one person needed for survival? Roughly around how much was that number? Poverty. Around close to around 17,000. No, and I told you that number changes every month based on inflation, based on prices changing. It was around 16, 17,000. It was around there. So just see, Lamai. Now, the minimum wage here is a 27,000. Fine. But if you look at Lamai, the minimum a person needs to stay away from poverty. Okay, that was how much? That was a 16, somewhere around 16 to 17,000 a month. Now that number changes. Now they will not ask you directly in your paper how much that number is. Every month the number changes based on inflation. So if that is the amount that one person needs for a month for survival, then if you look at Lamai, a family of 4 people, 2 adults and 2 children, that means they roughly need, we'll say 16,000. That means Lamai, they roughly need around 64,000 a month. So a family of 4 people roughly needs 64,000 a month to avoid poverty. Poverty and lemma, you don't have the money to satisfy your basic needs. The luxury life, vehicle and all this posh life. The minimum you need a 16,000 a month per person. So then a family of 4 will need around 64,000. So then lemma, if you're still earning the minimum wage, if this family of 4, only if one person is working and they are earning the minimum wage, then that's still not enough. So just think, Lamai, a family of 4 has to be earning a 64,000. If let's say if only one parent is working, that's the amount that they need. So how much of people might be in poverty in Sri Lanka? According to the 2019 report, 14.3% of the people in Sri Lanka are in poverty. That means they are earning below that poverty line. But there has not been a survey after this. Now, if they have a survey Lama in somewhere around 2024, 2025, this number will be much, much higher than that. So we don't have any official number as of yet. We'll see. Probably they will release a survey thing because it's not easy Lama to do this survey every time also. So we'll see what the number would be. I'm guessing it should be close to even a little bit higher than 20%. So that means Lama 20% of the country is in poverty, let's say 25%. That means 1 out of 4 people in the country are in poverty level. That is why now they are increasing this Aswasuma payments. They're doing all of that. But still, it's not that you can eliminate it that easily. So that's where it is right now in terms of minimum wages, poverty, and all of that. I added one more cartoon on this. That is relating to Lamai this. Did you all see a factory? Yeah, 70,000 a month per person. Did you all see Lamai the right, we'll see. I'll check. Okay. Did you all see the factory that had closed down? There was a factory in, I can't remember the name of that factory, I forgot the name. A garment factory that had closed down in the last couple of weeks. All of a sudden, they've closed down, and then there is so much of debates and arguments about that in the parliament. I think it's still not 100% clear why they closed down, but the problem with, yeah, the minimum wage should apply for private firms as well. Okay. But I'm not very sure how it will work for these audit firms and all it, because sometimes they get you all as contract people and different things. So sometimes that minimum wage doesn't apply based on how they employ you. Okay. So in terms of that firm closing down, now the investors, the big fellows in the firm, they'll somehow, get something sorted, and they will not really be the ones at the disadvantage. That's why you see the investors, there is a trampoline right at the bottom of them where they can bounce back. But if you look at the problem, the problem is on the workers. So I think there was around 1,400 workers working in that factory. So all of a sudden, Lamai, when a factory like that closes, what happens to those 1,400 workers? You can't easily find another job, Niraman. Who is going to hire 1,400 people? So even if they go little by little for some other places, but that again is going to be a problem. So, and these workers are not people, Lamai, who have a lot of money and a lot of savings, Lamai. So they live on their monthly salary. They get their monthly salary. That thing is over. They wait until the next salary. Not that they have savings to run 2-3 months without anything. So it's the workers who actually get affected from things like that. I can't remember the exact name of the factory, Lama. You can search for that. Just search for the garment factory that closed. I can't remember the exact name. Next or something. I think it's called Next. I can't remember the exact name. Okay. That's what is happening around in Sri Lanka. Okay. So with that being said, we'll move into, yes, something that happened to Mac as well, right? With McDonald's closing, all the employees were, had to leave. So with that, Lamai, we'll start with the questions. We'll try to finish both MCQs and the essay. Next apparel manufacturing. Yes, that's exactly. So we'll move into the MCQs first. We'll go in order, finish off the MCQs. We'll then move into the essay questions. So the faster you give me answers, the faster I will do it, faster I will finish off the class. I will finish everything off only and finish the class. Okay. So for MCQs, Lama, give me answers. So then I know how much of you all have understood. Then I can go much more fast. Okay. Starting Lama, 2011 A-levels, question number 15. They're asking you, a market is defined as being in equilibrium when? When is a market in equilibrium? When there is a maximum output at minimum cost, when the producer surplus is maximized, when prices are at their lowest possible level, when consumer satisfaction is maximized, when there is no tendency for the market price to change. Which one do you think is market equilibrium, Lamai? Most of you have given me the right answer, others? So market equilibrium is a situation where my demand and supply matches each other, right? In a situation where demand and supply matches each other, what can you tell about the price of the good? There is no tendency for the price of the good to change, no? So your answer is number 5, Lama. Now, when your, let's say, quantity demanded is greater than your quantity supplied, Lama, you have an excess demand. Then what happens? Then the price will start to increase when there is an excess demand. If the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, excess supply, Lama, price will start to come down. But if you are at equilibrium, that is, if the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied, then there is no tendency for your price to change. My price will stay at that level. So that's why we say market equilibrium situation where there is no tendency for the price to change. Now, some of you all gave me some other answers. I got answer number 1 and 3 on the chat box as well. One says, Lama, there's a maximum output at minimum cost. You can't say that, Lama. Just because you are at equilibrium, you can't say they are producing the maximum output or they are producing at the minimum cost. You can't say anything like that. Yeah. And then answer number 3, prices are at their lowest possible level. And just because it's at equilibrium, Lama, you can't say it's at the lowest possible level. Maybe it can go down even more. Right? Yeah. The equilibrium can change if the demand or supply curve shifts. If an external factor changes, then the equilibrium point can change. Correct. But in general, if you take the normal demand and supply curve, If it's at equilibrium, then there is no tendency for it to change. So answer is number 5. Then moving into the next one, 2011, question number 17. Now the question is asking, the diagram below, DD represents demand for the bus service in a university community. The bus fare per journey was OP. So we'll say my bus fare was 10 rupees ki OP. Was 10 rupees. And the number of journeys were ON. So let's say 100 people were going in the bus. If the university decided to provide the bus fare free of charge, what will happen to consumer surplus? Now, Lamai, right now, which area represents consumer surplus? Right now, before the fact that they gave it for free. Right now, consumer surplus. Now, how do you find consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is the difference between what the consumer is actually paying and what he is willing to pay. What he is willing to pay will be shown by the demand curve, Lamai. He is actually paying OP, sorry. That is 10 rupees in my example. So the difference between what he actually pays and what he is willing to pay for the quantity that they buy is called consumer surplus. So right now, consumer surplus is A. But if you start giving this for free, Lamai, then what would the price be? If you give it for free, now the price is going to be 0, Lamai. This is what the consumer is actually paying now. That red dotted line. What they are willing to pay. What they are willing to pay is Lamai shown by the demand curve. So difference between what the consumer is willing to pay and what he actually pays is what we call consumer surplus. So now the consumer surplus is what, Lamai? Now it is this entire thing. So earlier it was A. Now it is A, B, and C. So which one is your answer that talks about it? Answer number 3, Lamai. Some of you all went with answer number 2. Be very careful. Now answer number 2 says, Lamai, goes from A to B plus C. It's not A to B plus C, Lamai. It's A to APC. Now the second answer is saying that A is not a part of consumer surplus now. So be very careful. They will trick you with things like that. Okay. So it's answer 3 and not 2. Okay. Done. That's 2011. Okay. Then we go to my 2013. 2013 A levels, question number 10. They're saying, suppose the market for oranges is currently in equilibrium. That means demand and supply are equal to each other. If the supply of oranges decrease, while at the same time demand for oranges increase, what can you say about the price and the quantity of oranges? Now, in this question, have they told you that the demand and supply are changing by the same proportion or something is changing by a greater proportion? Have they told you anything like that? They are saying demand is increasing and the supply is increasing. Have they told demand is increasing more than the supply is increasing less? They have not talked about the proportion, right? So then, okay, I'll draw and show you. Let's take this as our diagram. So let's say, Lamai, right now, the price of an orange is 100 rupees. Let's say 1,000 oranges are sold. This is your supply. This is your demand. The question is saying, the supply of oranges decreases. That means supply shifts to the left. Okay. So I will shift the supply curve to the left. By how much it is shifting, they have not told Lamai. Is it a small decrease, the big decrease? They're just saying supply is decreasing. So I just decreased by a reasonable amount. And then they are saying the demand for oranges is increasing. So supply is falling, demand for oranges is going up. So then that also they haven't told me. How much is it going up? Little the lot, but they have told demand for oranges is going up. So therefore, I will increase the demand for oranges. So rightwards. Now, based on this, right now, I have shifted the supply curve and the demand curve by equal proportion. If you see the gap between the new curve and the old curve, it's equal, no, in both demand and supply. So I am assuming that these both are changing equally, but they have never told me that. Huh? So based on that assumption, if I draw, I can see, Lamai, that the price would have increased. Equilibrium price, let's say now orange is 150, but the quantity is 100. Quantity is still 1,000. Quantity is unchanged. But Lamai, they have never told me that the demand and supply are changing by the same proportion. What if I increase the demand a lot? Let's say demand is increasing much more than the Supply fall. Let's say, for example, now my demand is here now. Now what will happen? Now also the price will increase, let's say 180 now. And now if you see, Lamai, the quantity has increased. Quantity, let's say, is 1200. What if the demand increased only very little? Then the quantity will fall. So what can you say, Lamai, in this? No matter what happens in this situation, the price will definitely increase. Price will definitely go up. Whether demand and supply changes by same proportion, no, smaller proportion, no matter what happens, the price will definitely increase. But what about the quantity, Lamai? Quantity, will it increase? Will it decrease? Will it remain unchanged? We can't really say, no. Can you definitely say that the quantity is unchanged, Lamai? Can you say quantity will remain constant? You can't say that. You can say quantity remains constant if the demand and supply are changing by the same proportion. If that now, based on how I have drawn in this diagram, it is constant. Now I have drawn thinking that demand and supply changing by the same proportion. But question again, nowhere they have told that it's changing by the same proportion. So you can't make that assumption like that, Laman. So be careful when you all draw also. Now some of you all draw like this and you all figure out, now price increase, quantity same. But nowhere in the question they told you demand and supply is changing by the same proportion. So here, Lamai, price will definitely increase, but the quantity we don't know. It could increase, it could decrease, or it could even remain constant. So we can say that my quantity is ambiguous, or another word for this is indeterminate. Indeterminate. You can't exactly say what is happening to quantity. You can draw the find the answer without the diagram, then you have to picture that in your head, do you think? That's up to you. So which one is your answer then now? Price and quantity both rise? You can't say that. Price rises, but the change in quantity is ambiguous. Could be our answer. Price and quantity both fall. No, quantity rises, but price change is ambiguous. No, price will increase. Neither price nor quantity changes will. No. So answer is number 2. Shape 2013, question number 10. Now these things, product pick these points. Huh? There are questions like this repeated in the future as well. Going to the next. 2013, question number 13. If the demand increases, we have to draw right. Increase can rightward shift, correct. Okay. What is necessary for consumer surplus to be 0? Now, this is a very interesting story, Lamai. Now, you know where is consumer surplus 0? Now, consumer surplus, Lamai, is the difference between what the consumer is willing to pay. The answer there was, I think, the second. Okay. Difference between what the consumer is willing to pay and what he actually pays. Now, if you take an equilibrium situation, Lamai, this area is what we call consumer surplus. Now, try to picture this. Is the more flatter your demand curve becomes, consumer surplus comes down near them. Now, if I draw, let's say, Lamai, elastic curve, if I draw a very flat curve like this, yeah, and let's say this is supply, now consumer surplus is this very small part. So where do you think consumer surplus would be? 0. The more flatter and flatter your demand curve gets, consumer surplus is vanishing. When will your curve be the flattest? If your demand curve is, Lamai, perfectly elastic. If your demand curve is perfectly elastic, there is no consumer surplus. Because consumer surplus is the difference between what the consumer is willing to pay and what he actually pays. So if the demand is perfectly elastic, like here, he is willing to pay also, let's say, for example, 10 rupees, he is actually paying also 10 rupees. So there is no surplus that he actually gets. So when is consumer surplus 0? Consumer surplus is 0, Lamai, when demand is perfectly elastic. What happens if demand is perfectly inelastic? If demand is perfectly inelastic, Lamai, consumer surplus is infinity actually. So consumer surplus becomes this entire, this entire thing is consumer surplus. It's like infinity there. If it's perfectly elastic only, it becomes a 0. No, there is no burden here, Lamai. We're talking about consumer surplus. We're not talking about tax burden or something. Same with producer surplus as well. Yes. If the supply is perfectly elastic, then producer surplus will also be 0. I need to remember that perfectly inelastic curve is vertical and perfectly elastic curve is horizontal. I think you all remember that, right? So that's where the logic comes. That's where when you should not memorize. So perfectly inelastic is vertical. Why? Why is the perfectly inelastic curve vertical? No matter what the demand, what the price is, the demand will always be the same. No matter what the price, the demand is always. That's what you call perfectly inelastic. Quantity demand doesn't change. That's why the vertical line comes there. Unity elastic, it won't be zero level, so you can draw and see. If the demand is unitary elastic, draw and see. So you will not have a this one. So you will have, you might not, maybe it might not touch, you will have a part for consumer surplus. Produce surplus will be zero, like someone asked me before also, if supply is perfectly elastic. It can be supply perfectly elastic. Can't no, let me draw and see. If supply is perfectly inelastic and let's say demand is like this red area is consumer surplus. They're asking you for a situation where consumer surplus is zero. So consumer surplus will be zero, Lama, if the demand is perfectly elastic, not any other situation. Again, Lama, these are not things that you should be memorizing. Conduct, draw, and see. With some logic, you know the shapes of the elasticities. Draw and see which one fits. Okay. And then guys, one more thing, I'll give you an interesting story, right? This whole consumer surplus story, how it practically gets used in certain industries. Now, if you take Lama, the airline industry is a very nice example of how they manipulate this consumer surplus. When is unitary consumer price surplus equal? No, it doesn't have to be. Okay. So, do you all know the story behind Lama, how airlines started with this whole business class and first class tickets? Okay, so I'll give you an example of this airline ticket. Right now, when you're flying abroad, Lama, you all know you can buy air tickets. No? If you buy air tickets, you have normal economy class tickets, business class tickets. Even above that, you have the first class tickets. So now, if you draw the demand for air tickets and the supply of airline services, okay, you have the equilibrium price. Let's say equilibrium price, one ticket is 50,000. Okay. But you know, Lamai, the logic of consumer surplus. What does this mean? Now, if you take Lamai, let's say five customers, the first five customers, they are willing to pay Lamai, they are willing to pay, let's say, even 200,000 to buy the ticket. If you connect that to the demand curve, they're willing to pay 200,000 to buy the ticket. But because of market equilibrium, they are paying only 50,000. That's why that area becomes consumer surplus. Like that, until equilibrium, it goes up. So you know what the airlines do, Lamai? Airlines have discriminatory pricing. So they know there are some consumers, now market equilibrium price is 50,000, correct? They know there are some consumers willing to pay much more. So what does the airlines do, Lamai? For these kind of people, instead of giving that consumer surplus for them, what the airlines do is, Lamai, they come up with a business class and first class and all of that. So they have a very limited seats. They say, okay, first class tickets, 200,000. You get a little bit of extra comfort and more leg space, some posher food. You get that. So then what they're trying to do is, Lamai, they're trying to that consumer surplus. Instead of giving it to the consumer, the airline takes it. That's what they do. And even if you take, let's say, for example, the business class. So let's say there are 15 people who are willing to pay, let's say 100,000 and go. So they don't allow them to do that as well, Lamai. So they put a business class there. They know there are some people who are willing to pay a little high port. That is the extra comfort they know. Some leg space and some, better view and all of that. So that's how the airline industry makes use of that consumer surplus thing. So the airline industry tries as much as possible. Instead of giving the consumer surplus, they try to get it by, offering different things. That's why it's practically used. The fifth one can I explain? Price elastic demand is actually greater than price elastic supply. So they are saying that PED is greater than PES. So in terms of value, so let's say PED is elastic and let's say maybe PES is inelastic. So just because PED is elastic and PES is inelastic, that doesn't mean consumer surplus will be zero. Okay. So 13 is number one. Okay. Going into the next one, 2014. Okay. 14 is saying the demand and supply data is given. Assuming that the demand and supply curves are linear, linear means straight lines, what is the correct answer that shows the equilibrium price and quantity? So now, make it you can do two things. One is if you want, you can make the demand equation, supply equation, equate the two and do that. How many people did it that way? Yes. Got the demand equation, made the supply equation, equated and got it. But you don't have to do all of that. That is also correct, not that it's wrong, right? But what you can do is, you can do it much less. Focus area 6, is it uploaded on YouTube? No. Recordings will not be there on YouTube. If I feel I have some free time, I will put it on YouTube. Otherwise, I will not. So on your end, make sure you come to class. QDQS, what you can do is you can extend the diagram. Okay. So here when the price is 80, they are saying QD is 400 and the supply is 800. When the price is 100, QD is 200, supply is 1000. Now, if you look at it, to get into equilibrium, demand and supply has to be equal. This is a linear demand and supply curve. Even if they have not told in your paper, you always have linear ones. So then, now you can understand when the price is increasing, the gap between demand and supply is going up. So maybe what you should do is decrease the price and see. So if I reduce the price now 100 to 80, 80 to 60, what happens to the quantity demand at this point? 200, 400, what's the number? If it's a linear demand curve, 200, 400 has to be 600. What about the supply line? 1000, 800, and then 600. So you fill that blank line. So now you can see demand and supply are equal. If you really want, you make the demand equation, supply equation, do it. But it's with the table itself, either going up or down, you should be able to figure that out. So then that's your equilibrium price and quantity. So price is 60 and the quantity is a 600. Answer number 3. Shape. Easy one. Then we go to the next. 2015. 2015 A levels, question number 9. Yes, the equation takes time, that's why you have to save time. Now, in terms of your timing, always remember, for a MCQ, you can roughly take around 2 minutes. That is your timing. A little bit more than that is fine, but 2 minutes is the ideal quantity. So when you all are doing a paper, that doesn't mean free MCQ exactly 2 minutes gone on here. But roughly now when you all are doing a paper, A-level paper, you have a clock, no? You have a watch with you. No? So then roughly, let's say your paper starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay? Paper 1 starts at 1 o'clock. Then by 1:20, so that when 20 minutes have gone, roughly see, have you done around 10 questions? Then you're on time. So 10 questions karanna, have you done 20? So let's say now paper starts at 1 o'clock. Now time has become 2 o'clock. That means 1 hour has gone again. Not 1 hour. It's 1 hour. At least see, have you done at least little bit more than half of the paper? So that timing has to be there. 1 for MCQs, 1 MCQ, 2 minutes is the ideal time. So in your head, have that, but econ is usually not a paper that you will run out of time unless you think you daydream and look up a little and waste time. Otherwise, you will not run out of time. Okay, so this one, they're saying at a given time, when demand increases and supply decreases in a competitive market for a normal good, what would happen? Now, the same thing was there before Nilama. So now it might be a little bit of a different situation. We'll see. They're saying at a time where demand increases, supply decreases. That's the same thing that we had before, that orange example. So let's say this is the price. Now, again, in this question, have they told that the demand is increasing by a greater proportion or supply is decreasing by a greater proportion? Anything like that about the proportions? Nothing like that. They're just saying demand is increasing, supply is decreasing. So supply is decreasing, leftward shift. Okay. Demand is increasing here, rightward shift. Same diagram that I drew in the previous MCQ. Then based on this, you can definitely see that the price is going up. But quantity, I have shifted the demand and supply curve by the same proportion. Based on that, my quantity is unchanged. But can I definitely say that the quantity will be unchanged? As the question said, I can say quantity is unchanged if the question had said demand increases and supply decreases by the same proportion. They haven't told that level. Now, if the demand increases much more, quantity would have gone up. If the demand has increased only a little, quantity would have come down. So again, same thing as the previous MCQ, the price will go up for sure, but the quantity, we don't know. It can increase, it can decrease, it can remain constant. It is ambiguous. Same thing as the previous one, or indeterminate. So which one is your answer then? Answer? Answer 5. The price will rise. The quantity will either rise, fall, or remain unchanged. Done. Same thing, no? 2015, question 13. Okay. They're saying, if with a downward sloping market demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve, a decrease in input prices will. Very easy, no? Draw and see. So this is your demand. This is your supply. Okay. First, tell me, Lama, if there is a decrease in input prices, which curve gets affected, supply or demand? Input prices. Input prices can your cost of production. Your cost of production has come down now. What will happen? Okay, supply. Does it increase or does it decrease? Cost of production comes down, can supply would increase. That's a rightward shift of your supply curve, S1. So then what happens to your equilibrium price now? What happens to your quantity? Price, let's say 10 would have gone to 9, quantity 1000 would have gone to, let's say 1000. The numbers I'm just giving to make it easy for you. But if you can see the why, price has come down, the quantity has increased. So look for an answer that talks about this. These are like free marks in your paper. මේවා miss කරගන්නවා කියන්නේ anything. That is it in your stupidity. Which one's the answer? A decrease in the price and an increase in the quantity. Done. Then 2015 question 14. They're saying a small country's domestic when QD is greater than QS. Answer was 4. When QD is greater than QS, price increases or decreases. That is when the quantity demand is greater. That means there is an excess demand. So when there's an excess demand, price will start to go up. That is what happens. Okay. Yeah. Then 14th, they've given a few demand and supply equations, and they're saying, assume that the sugar market is open for international trade and the world market price for sugar is 60. What is the quantity of sugar that is domestically supplied when the country is open for international trade? It looks like a very hard question, Lamai. You know, the simplest thing that they're asking you. They're asking you, when the price is 60 rupees, how much is the quantity supplied? That is the simplest thing they're asking you. So you take the supply equation, put 60 and see how much is the QS. But I'll graphically explain this to you. So what is happening over here is, Lamai, we learned this in unit number 9 a little. You have the demand curve. This is the domestic demand curve. This is your domestic supply. So based on demand and supply, Lama, you have a equilibrium and price and quantity. But what happens now? They are opening for international trade. That means, Lama, now there is a world market supply. This is the world market supply curve. We learned this a little in unit number 9. So they are saying in the world market, the price of sugar is 60. So when the price of sugar is 60, when the world market is selling at 60, Lama, you can't sell at a higher price. So now you also have to sell at 60. So then they're asking you at the price of 60, how many units will the domestic producer supply? That is what they're asking. So if you take the supply equation, that is QS equals minus 80 plus 2P, when the price is 60, so 2 into 60, that is minus 80 plus 120, you get a ounce. You get a pot. Anna. That is the domestic supply, Lama. That is your answer. Now, in case if you want to go a little bit more detail into this question, can you tell me at this world market price, Lama, how much will the quantity demanded be? Maybe in your paper, if they ask you that, how much is the QD at the price of 60? Put 60 to the QD equation and see. 320 minus 3 into 60. You get 140, right? That is the QD. Then if they ask you, Lamai, if they ask you how much units will be imported, how much is that? At the price of 60, domestic supply is 40 units, demand is 140 units. So how much will be imported, Lamai? This amount will be imported. That is 100 units that is imported. Answer is not 60, Lamai. Answer is 40. Okay. Amount imported will be 100. How did I know to use the supply equation? Because the question is saying what is the quantity of sugar that is domestically supplied. They're asking you how much is the domestic supply at price 60. How 140, Lamai? I substitute 60 to the demand equation. The price is 80. So why? Domestic price is not 80. The price is 60. Excess demand is imported. Yes. Okay. Yes. What happens is, Lamai, I'm guessing some of you all have not learned that part in unit number 9, right? There is a small connection there. So you have the supply curve, Lamai. This is what you call the domestic supply curve. Okay. This is what you call the domestic demand curve. Domestic in your country, your local suppliers, your local buyers. So based on your local suppliers, local buyers, you might have an equilibrium price. How much is that price, if anyone who calculated demand and supply equate it, how much do you get as equilibrium price? 80, right? So in your local market, this thing was sold at 80 rupees. But now when you're open for international trade, they are saying you can get sugar down for 60. So when you're getting imported sugar for 60 rupees, your domestic seller can't sell his sugar at 80. He also has to now sell at 60, whether he likes it or not. Now, same thing I told you in class, the Kick Cola, Coca-Cola example. Kick Cola is selling. But when Coca-Cola comes to the market from international markets, if they are selling at 200, Kick Cola also has to match that price. So same thing happens here. No matter what you had as equilibrium, when you're open for international trade, you have to sell at the price that the foreign seller is selling. So now the market price becomes 60 lamai. That equilibrium is no longer valid now. So now at the price of 60, how many units will your domestic supplier supply? So that is what they're asking you. So at the price of 60, you put to the supply equation and you see how much are they supplying. So when the price is, they are supplying only 40 units. That is your answer. So your answer is number 1. I just went a little bit more in detail to ask you about how much is demanded, how much is this. So at the price of 60, how much will be demanded? That will be 140 units. How did I get 140? By putting 60 to the demand equation. Then domestic supply is only 40. Demand is 140. That means the balance is what? The balance is imported. So there is 100 units that will be imported. None of that they're asking you in this question. But you don't like the imported good. There's nothing like that. Here we assume that the domestic good and the imported good is homogeneous. It's the exact same. Okay. No. Done. 40. How many of you got that right? Yeah, similar to a maximum price, but not a maximum price. But yeah, if you want to think of it. Good. Then going to the next one. 2016 A-levels, question number 7. Okay, 16 A-levels question number 7 is saying, suppose X is an inferior good sold in a competitive market. Okay, assuming that the other things remain constant, it could be said from the equation. Yes, 80. What is the effect of a decrease in the income of buyers on the demand, equilibrium price, and equilibrium quantity for good X? So we'll draw and see. They're talking about equilibrium, so you can draw. Okay. This is the demand, this is the supply. Right now, let's say price is 100 rupees, quantity is 1000. They're saying, this is an inferior good. They have told you that in the question. Then they are telling you, a decrease in the income of buyers. So people's income is coming down. If income comes down, what happens to the demand for an inferior good? If people's income comes down, demand for an inferior good will increase la by normal good nang decrease. Inferior good has a negative relationship. Now, when you're poor, you buy more inferior goods. So if income decreases la my demand for your inferior good will increase. Anna rightward shift of your demand curve. Demand will increase. Now, if your demand increases, now look at this one and see, Lamai, what happens to equilibrium price? What happens to equilibrium quantity? Now you just have to picture this. This is your new equilibrium. Men a new equilibrium price. Men a new equilibrium quantity. So what has happened to price? What has happened to quantity? Price has also increased. Quantity has also. So which one is your answer? It's answer number 2, no? Demand increases, equilibrium price and quantity also increases. So these lemma you have to product, draw and picture this thing. May I think are memorize karanna bad. That's why lemma most of you all struggle with econ. And even if you take econ, why the pass rate and even the amount of A's that people are getting are very less. I showed you last time I showed you all, no? Last week. The amount of A's, there were I think only around 12% or something who have got A's. So why is there only 12% getting A's, Lama? Because everyone memorizes. They try to memorize a tute and go and they try to do the question. Karan ba Lama. That's why so many people also ask me, sir, can we buy your tute? You can't learn by just reading a tute, Lama. You need to logically understand how this actually applies. So if you are memorizing, please stop doing that nonsense. Okay. So that then 2070. Okay, easy one. They're saying that my demand and supply equations are given. They're asking for equilibrium price and quantity. If you can't do this, if you're in this class right now doing A levels in 25, if you can't do this question, Lamai, please don't do A levels this year, do it next year. Okay. So how do you find equilibrium price and quantity? You equate the demand and the supply equation. Disgrace for me to do this though, but never mind. So 80 minus 2p is equal to minus 20 plus 3p. If you work around, how much do we get for p? I'm not going to solve the whole thing. How much do we get for p? 20. Right. So equilibrium price is 20. Okay. Then how much do we get for the quantity? There's only one answer that has 20 also. So then you substitute either to the demand or supply equation. If I substitute the demand equation, I get 40 as the quantity. So price is 20, quantity is 40. So these are again like free marks in your paper. See, now if you really analyze, in this paper, my 2017 paper, they gave this in the MCQ paper. They gave equilibrium calculation. In paper 2, Lamai, there is no calculation. 2017 paper 2, there is no calculation. All the 5 questions that were there from unit number 2 and 3 were theory-based questions because they tested the calculation here. So usually by looking at part 1, you can put the guess what happens to part 2. But not that I will be telling you all anything, but you just keep that in mind. When you do paper 1, next day is paper 2. If something has been repeatedly tested in paper 1, the chance of it coming again in paper 2 is less because they'll try to test something new. Answer the previous one was 2. Okay, done. Then 2018. 2018 question number 10. They're saying, if both demand and supply of tea increase, what will happen to equilibrium price and quantity? Again, now we'll draw and see. Now, they have not told you, is demand and supply changing by the same proportion or not? They have just said demand and supply is increasing. So we'll see them. If I draw demand, supply, right now, let's say price of tea is 1,000 rupees, 10 people are buying tea. Okay. And they are saying demand and supply are both increasing. So demand increasing, rightward shift. Supply increasing, I'll increase the supply and demand by the same proportion. Will. So if I increase the supply also by the same proportion, then Lamai, you will see the price is remaining constant, but the quantity has increased. This is if I increase the demand and supply by the same proportion. Have they told you that it is increasing by the same proportion? Anywhere in the question, if both demand and supply increases proportionately, nothing like that. Now, if the supply increased only a little, Lamai, now just picture this, right? Now, what if your supply increased only a little? Okay. Demand increased a lot, but supply increased a little. Now what happens? Now the price increases, quantity increases. What if the supply increase is much bigger? Now price decreases, quantity increases. So they have not told you what are they increasing equally or not. They haven't told. If it changes equally, you can say price is equal. But otherwise, you can't tell, am I? So your price can either increase, decrease, or stay constant. We don't know. Quantity we know for sure, it will increase. So therefore, Lamai, it's the same knowledge they're testing in the previous one, just changing the question a bit now. Price is indeterminate. You can't say that. But quantity for sure, you know, it will increase. So which one is your answer? Now, these kind of things, Lama, you have to put the get the logic. It's not about memorizing this. No, you don't have to think about elasticity. They are not needed. You can just draw normal demand and supply. Even if you think of elasticity, that doesn't mean your answer will change. Okay. Now, that. Then 2018 question 13. Okay, we'll do the MCQs and then I'll give you a break. They're saying, what about answer 4? Price increases, quantity. No. So if you draw and see, you can definitely see in the quantity is increasing. How are you saying quantity is indeterminate? No matter what you draw, if demand changes a little or supply changes a little, you definitely know the quantity is increasing. So you can't say quantity is indeterminate. The price is the one that you can't really say. Price can increase, decrease, or stay constant. Why supply is not increasing? Supply is increasing. I'm shifting the supply curve to the right. Here is my new supply curve. This is my new demand curve. If we can't do these questions, should we go through recordings again or everything, just these questions? It's like this, Lama. Now, these kind of questions, if you're struggling with these kind of questions, is Lama, you have not understood the logic behind this story. Just going through the theory recordings, I don't think will help, because in the theory recordings, I don't explain this anywhere saying if the demand increase, supply increase, price will remain indeterminate. There is nothing like that. That will ever be there. So it's about you drawing and logically figuring it out. You draw and see, right, if this happens, this is what will happen. So that's why you have to take time, Lama. If both of it changes equally, draw and see what happens to price, what happens to quantity. Maybe then draw another diagram and see, what if demand increases more than the supply? Then what will happen? What if the demand increases only a little? Then what will happen? So draw and see, and then you can figure out, for sure, you know quantity will increase, but price we don't know. You will figure out price can either increase, decrease, or stay constant. That is what has to happen on your end. Okay. Right. Then going to 11. In a competitive market for cinnamon, 10 kilos of 10 million kilograms were sold at 900 per kilo at 2016. In 2017, 10 million kilos are sold at 800 per kilo. Which the following would have caused this? Now, I again draw, right? So I will draw a demand and supply diagram. This is my demand curve. This is my supply curve. So right now they are saying in 2016, 10 million kilos were sold at 900. Okay, so at 900 rupees, they were selling 10 million kilos. That was the equilibrium sold buy and sell. Now they are saying, look carefully. Now they are saying in 2017, same 10 million were sold, but at only 800 per kilo. So in my graph, if I am to show that at 800, 10 million means somewhere around here. So now my equilibrium is in the red dot. Earlier, my equilibrium was in the yellow dot. Now my equilibrium is in the red dot. So how can I go to an equilibrium in the red dot? Which curve should shift where? Only one curve shifting will not help also. If I reduce the demand, let's say I reduce the demand. If I only reduce the demand, my equilibrium is that is blue color. So demand has to reduce, demand has to come down. Along with that, supply should also increase. If the supply increases, shifts to the right, demand decreases, shifts to the left, then you can come to this equilibrium at price 800, quantity 10 million. So those you have to draw lamai. Draw logically understand. Menna meka thamai they are asking. This is how I can get that. In any theory note lamai, you will not have a thing like this. You will not have a thing that says if demand and supply both, if supply increase and demand decrease, this is what happens. There is nothing like that. No, this is not law of supply, law of demand lamai. This is the equilibrium changing. So you have to shift the curve. Okay. So just to summarize that lamai, there is nothing hard, right? The question is saying, so you have to figure out a way how you get there. The question is saying, right, in 2016, you were selling, I have to draw this. Question is saying in 2016, you were selling 10 million kilos at 900. That means this is your equilibrium, yellow color dot. 10 million kilos, you were selling at the price of 900 rupees. Now they are saying in 2017, you're selling same 10 million at 800. So that's in my graph, it's this point, this blue color dot. So how do you go from an equilibrium from that yellow color dot to the blue color dot? That is where your logical thinking, your brains has to come there. So you think, how can I go there? Maybe one way is demand has to come down. Along with demand coming down, if the supply also increases, then I can get there. Is why we say the answer has to be supply increasing, demand coming down. So supply increasing, demand coming down. Which one is that answer? Answer number 3. How do you know it's equilibrium demand? Because they are saying this is the amount sold. No? So sold kiyanne producer has to supply, consumer has to buy. The quantity sold in the market is the equilibrium quantity. Yeah. Okay. Done. Then they're asking the next part. 2018 question number 50. The question saying, suppose the market demand and supply equations are there. The price elasticity of demand at market equilibrium. So first, can you find Lamai the equilibrium price and quantity from before finding the PED? How much is your equilibrium price and quantity? That you all can do, Lamai. Can you all give me the answer? Prices. Equilibrium price is 30. Okay. How much is the equilibrium quantity? Quantity is 40 units. That you should be able to do. Now, if you can't do that, Lamai, then do LLs in 2026. Right. Then, now we'll find PED. How do you find PED, Lamai? PED, your change in QD over change in P into price over QD. Now, you know you can change this change in QD over change in P into the minus B part in your demand equation. It can be substituted, no? Multiplied by price over QD. So equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. So here, your minus B is made in minus 4. Equilibrium price is 30. Equilibrium quantity is 40. So if you simplify, how much do we get? Price decrease, demand has to increase, the supply has no change. No, I think you might have got it right here, but thinking is wrong. Which one do you get? You get minus 3. So which one is the answer? Answer number 4. Fine. Done. That's 2015. The question. Okay, these are again very easy ones. You're struggling with a question like this. These calculations are like free marks in your paper. You're struggling with a question like this. Product work a little hard, lamai, because it's not that hard at all. Previous one was 3. Okay, 18 done. Then we go to 19. 19 is saying, lamai, the diagram below shows the market demand curve for good X. Change in market equilibrium quantity from point A to point B would have been caused by. Very easy, lamai. So you had equilibrium, lamai, you should have had a supply curve, no, even though they have not shown it. So initially you would have had a supply curve over here, right? That's why you were at equilibrium at point A. Now they are saying equilibrium is not at point A, now the equilibrium is point B. So for you to go to equilibrium at point B, which curve has to shift where? You are going from this point to this point now. Your supply curve should have shifted, right? If your supply curve shifted to the right, now you have equilibrium at point B. That's where you logically draw and figure it out. So then look for an answer where the supply will shift to the right, lamai. For an answer where the supply will increase. Which one will increase your supply? Increase in the price of a substitute, consume income, all of those affect demand, lamai. So 1, 2, and 3 cut. 4 is saying a decrease in the cost of production. Correct? No? If your cost of production comes down or price of inputs come down, supply will increase. Rightward shift, and you will get there. And then a decrease in the supply of good X. No, it has to be an increase in supply of good X. That is that. Explain 2018 question 15. Shall I come to it at the end? Okay, this is a very easy question, Lama. If you're missing it, you have missed a complete basic fundamental part if you are struggling with this. So they're telling you to find PED at equilibrium. So first what you do is you find the equilibrium price and quantity. Take the two demand and supply equations, find equilibrium price quantity. Then what do you do? Now you put it into the PED equation. So this is your PED equation, minus B into price over QT. So minus B you take from the demand equation, that is the minus 4. Price you take the equilibrium price, quantity you take the equilibrium quantity, and you substitute and you calculate. So minus 4 into 13 over 40. Okay. How did I get minus 4 from the demand equation? Because demand equation is QD is equal to A minus BP. So your demand equation they have given is 160 minus 4P. So this minus 4 is that minus B, lamai. Okay. This one can do, sir. Drawing part is bit confusing. Drawing part is not confusing. If you have memorized, definitely it will be confusing. Okay, so 8 is done. 4. Then moving into the next one, 2019 question number 9. This one is asking, assume a hypothetical competitive market which is in equilibrium at 100 per unit. Now assume that the market supply changes from being elastic to being inelastic. What is the effect on consumer surplus, producer surplus? Again, you have to draw, lamai. So I'll draw. So initially they are saying supply is elastic, no? No. So supply is elastic, it's a flatter curve like this. Okay, it's a flat curve like this. Okay, flat curve. Demand, I'll draw a normal demand curve. They have not told me anything about demand. Okay. So then, based on this yellow area is consumer surplus. The green area is producer surplus. Okay. Now they are saying the supply curve is changing from, this is an elastic supply curve, flat one, changing from elastic to being inelastic. So from elastic to inelastic, if it changes, now how does it look like? Okay. So demand curve, I'm not changing anything. I'm just drawing it the same way. Okay. So now what happens? Now your consumer surplus, Lama, if you see, it's the same thing. Earlier also same thing. Now also it looks like the same thing. It has not really changed. But look at your producer surplus now. Your producer surplus is now much more higher. Equilibrium also will not change. So what has happened to your consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is unchanged. What has happened to your producer surplus? Producer surplus has increased now. So which one is your answer? Number 3. So if the price changes, then you'll draw accordingly. But the question is not saying that the price is changing. Maybe if the equilibrium price and all is come down, then consumer surplus could have increased as well. Nowhere in the question they have told you something like that. I had a comment on the chat box saying this is the most annoying unit. Personally, I feel this is the most easiest unit in your syllabus. I know. In general, for those who have now, you have finished studying the syllabus, which one is the most easiest unit that you have come across in the whole syllabus? You all have done all the 12 units. Now, what's the easiest for you, person? Different people will have different ones. Which one's the easiest for you? Yeah, you can draw it on the same graph, no problem. 9. Nice. Nice to see some of you all have grade 13 units also. Good. So, I know for me personally, when I was doing A-levels, unit 2 was the easiest unit for me because there was nothing much to memorize. It's about logically understanding. Now, if you are more into like a memorizing kind of a person, by hearting things, then I feel 2 will be a little bit hard. But if You logically can put it into your brain. 2, I would say, is the easiest one that is there. 3 is also easy. The calculations that you get from unit number 3 is very easy. It looks hard once you get the thing. Once we have done a lot of questions, it becomes very, very easy there. Okay, right. That's 2019 question number 9. Okay, any question that you missed, I'll count it at the end. Okay, then going to question number 11. Yes, 6 is also not hard, Lamai. Macroeconomic equilibrium. Assume that in a private higher education institute, the internet service was at first was available to students at no charge. Remember, this is the same thing opposite of that bus example. Okay. Initially, it was given at 0 rupees. That means initially the consumer surplus 0 now. Initially, consumer surplus would have been this entire thing. No. Now they are saying later the institute decided to charge 100 rupees per hour for internet. So if they charge 100 rupees per hour, now Lamai the consumer surplus becomes, earlier it was that entire triangle, now it is this small thing. So they are asking you, what is the loss in consumer surplus? Very easy, Lamai. Can you all calculate and tell me what's the consumer surplus before? That's the entire triangle. Half into base is 600, height is 150. How much do we get there? Half into 600, 150. 45,000. Okay. 45,000. How much is the consumer surplus after? Now it is half into base is 200, height is 150 minus 100. That is 50. So then half into 200 into 50, how much do we get now? We get, yes, there's a trapezium here. If you want to find the loss, then if you want, you can do that, but that's a little too hard. No? So you get 5,000. So earlier it was 40,000, now it is 5,000. How much is the loss? It has fallen by 40,000. So they're asking you what is the loss in consumer surplus. They are not asking you what is the new consumer surplus. Never. They're asking you what is the loss in consumer surplus. The loss in consumer surplus is how much? It's a 40,000. Now the same question, they can ask you what is the new consumer surplus. Be careful. So answer is done. Fine. 50 because of this, come on. Okay, these are easy ones. This is the triangle. Finding consumer surplus. Half into, this is 200, this is 50. Let's try the questions and come. If you're not tried and come and trying to figure it out now while I am doing it, it'll be a little too fast. Okay. You can get 40,000. The other way you can get 40,000 is by finding the area of this entire trapezium though. But that I would feel is a bit more difficult. And then there will not be any logic behind that. Okay, few more questions to go and then we can move to the break. The faster you give me answers, the faster we can go. Okay. So 2020 A-levels, question number 8. The question is asking, in a competitive market, if both demand and supply increase, what will be the effect on equilibrium price and quantity? Same question was there before. Now, again, here also, they are not saying, is it changing by the more proportion? They're just saying, what will happen if demand and supply will both increase? So if you draw, you can see this is the price. This is the quantity. If the demand also increase and the supply also increase, demand also increase. If I draw it by equal proportion, then what would happen? Then definitely quantity will go up, that we know. Price will stay the same. But have they said the price is the demand and supply changing by same proportion? No. So same learning as the previous one. The quantity will definitely increase, Lamai. But price, we don't know. It could increase, decrease, or remain unchanged. Quantity is ambiguous. So which answer talks about that? Answer number. The quantity will definitely increase, but the price could either rise, fall, or remain constant. Now, the same thing, Lamai, they're testing it multiple times. You should get the hang of this now. Okay. Then the next one. This is a very interesting question, Lamai. Listen. They're saying, demonstrating their generosity at a time of national distress. I think this is the most interesting question out of all of this. Vegetable farmers in a country decided to sell as much as vegetables consumers are willing to buy at half the competitive market price. As a result of this, what will happen? They're saying economic surplus will fall, it will increase, won't change, consumer surplus will fall, we'll see. Okay. So I'll explain this to you, Lamai, with a practical example. Listen. Lamai, they're saying in a time of national distress. Now here, Lamai, they are referring to COVID. Right? So they try to put a practical question here. So 2020 paper, this is the demand for the vegetable. And let's say this is the supply of the vegetable. Based on the demand and supply, let's say, Lamai, the price of this vegetable, 1 kilo was 100 rupees. 1 kilo was 100 rupees. People were buying 1000 kilos. Okay. Now, listen. Now the question is saying, Lamai, demonstrating their generosity at the time of distress. So let's say COVID has hit. During COVID, Lamai, what has happened? The farmers have decided to do what? No, elastic, that doesn't matter, Lamai. You don't have to connect the elastic. Okay. Vegetable farmers in the country decided to sell as much as vegetables as consumers want to buy at half of the market equilibrium price. So if the equilibrium price was 100, now at the price of 50, they are selling, the farmers are selling whatever quantity that the consumers are willing to buy. So let's say consumers are willing to buy 1500 kilos. Can you first tell me, Lamai, what happens to consumer surplus? Earlier, consumer was paying 100 rupees buying 1000 units. So earlier, Lamai, consumer surplus was this yellow color area. Earlier, this is consumer surplus. They are buying 1000 kilos at 100 rupees. Okay. Now, Lamai, the farmers are selling it at half the price. And they are selling whatever quantity consumers are willing to buy. So half the price can 50. At 50, they are willing to buy 1500. So now the consumer surplus is which area, Lamai? Earlier the yellow area, now it increases. Now it goes up to here. Do you all agree with me there? Consumer surplus has increased. Fine. Save. Consumer surplus has gone up. Now we'll try to analyze, Lamai, the producer surplus. That is where it becomes interesting. Now, producer surplus, before all of this, producer surplus is this green color area. Producer is getting 100 rupees. They are selling 1000 units. So producer surplus was the green color area. Producer surplus is the green color area. Now, how much is the producer surplus? How much is the producer surplus now? Is the producer surplus this small red color area? Is it this? If it is this, you can say producer surplus decreased. It is not this small red color area. What is producer surplus now? Producer surplus is the difference between what the producer is willing to get and what he actually gets. Now you need to understand, Lamai, the producer is not supplying this amount of units. Producer is supplying now, he is supplying 1500 units. He is supplying 1500 units. So Lamai, to supply 1500 units, the producer will minimum expect this much. This red color triangle-like area, that is what the producer minimum expects to supply 1500 units. Area below the supply curve is the total variable cost we say. That's what the producer expects. What the producer is actually receiving is 50 into 1500. He's actually receiving this. Okay. The difference between what the producer is willing to get and what he actually gets is the what we call producer surplus. Now, if I'm to give you a simple example, Lamai, if I draw a separate one here, how is that below triangle producer surplus? Because let's say to supply 100 units, producer is willing to supply it at this price. That's what he's minimum expecting. This red color, this one. What he actually gets is this entire blue color one. So difference between what he is willing to get and what he actually gets, this green shaded area became produced. That's how it normally becomes. But that same logic, if you apply it to this situation, it's a little different. In this situation, Lamai, that red color triangle is what the producer is expecting. At area below the supply curve for 1,500 units. He is expecting that red color triangle. But what he actually gets is, he is only getting 50 rupees a kilo. No, he's selling at half the equilibrium price. In my example, 50. He's only get 50 into 1,500. So in this situation, Lamai, his producer surplus. Now, if you really look at it, producer surplus, Lamai, it will become negative here. Producer doesn't have a surplus. He is actually receiving less than what he is actually expecting. You need to understand that. Earlier, now I can't show that producer surplus in the diagram here, Lamai, because it's a negative. That is not to be seen in the diagram. Earlier producer surplus is this brown color shaded area. Now it's not that small triangle. Now the producer surplus is a negative. So producer surplus, Lamai, has fallen a lot. It has even gone to negative from a positive territory. It has even become negative. That is what has happened with producer surplus. Okay. So then, if that is the case, what do you think would have happened to economic surplus, Lamai? Consumer surplus increased a little. Producer surplus fell a lot. Both of that together is what you call economic surplus. Lamai. What do you think would have happened to economic surplus? Economic surplus would have come down. And that is the logic behind this question, Lamai. That's how it works. Now, even I remember initially when I did this question, right? Initially when I did, I also was thinking produce surplus is that small triangle there. But then I realized, no, it can't be that small triangle. It's much bigger than this. The red area without the blue one is the negative. No, so it's like this. Now, if you want to find this now, if you want to put some numbers and find Lamai, now I can't show you the area of produce surplus, right? But what I can do is, do you all remember Lamai, maybe for the smarter fellows, shall I give you all some numbers to calculate this? Okay. I'll calculate this for you and show you. We'll draw a unitary elastic supply curve, Lamai, then easy. Okay. Right. Lamai, can you all calculate? Do you all remember producer surplus is the difference between total revenue minus total variable cost? Do you all remember that equation? From the producer's total revenue, if you minus his variable cost, you get producer surplus. We can use that equation to calculate here. Okay. The half into base in triangle part will not be applicable here. So, Lamai, before the think, before this whole generosity, whatever, what is the producer's variable cost? That is this blue color area, Lamai. That is his variable cost. What is the producer's total revenue? 100 into 1000. So give me the numbers. Total revenue is 100 into 1000. That is 100 into 1000. That is 100,000. How much is the variable cost, Lamai? That's the blue color triangle, area below the supply curve. So that is half into base is 1000, height is 100. How much do we get? Half into base into height. How much do you all get over there? You get 50,000, right? Then what is the producer surplus before all of this, Lamai? Before this generosity, all of it. Total revenue is 100,000. Variable cost is 50,000. Producer surplus is now 50,000. Harini. Okay. Now we'll compare the producer surplus after. Look at how I calculate. Producer surplus after, Lamai. Okay. Okay. Watch carefully. Now, the producer is selling, Lamai, how many kilos? He is now selling 1,500 kilos. Let's say I'll just put some numbers here. For this, let's say he is expecting 150. Okay. Now tell me, what is the producer surplus? Now same logic, TR minus TVC. Now how much is his total revenue? He's selling at 50 rupees now. He's selling 1,500 kilos. How much is his total revenue? 50 into 1,500. His total revenue is now 75,000. How much is his producer surplus? Sorry, variable cost now. Variable cost is Lamai, this green shaded triangle. He's supplying 1,500 now. How much is that? Yes, TVC is the area below the supply curve, Lamai. That logic I feel you should know. Okay. So how much is that? Half into base is 1,500. Height is 150. How much do you get there? 1,500 into 500 divide by 2. 112,500. Okay. Now how much is the producer surplus? That's I'm telling you, producer surplus here is negative after this thing. How much is the producer surplus? 75,000 minus 112,500. Producer surplus is a negative 37,500. And that is what I told you all before as well. I'm proving it to you now with numbers. Did that logic go into your head somewhere? Consumer surplus will increase. Producer surplus falls a lot. It even goes to negative, which was 50,000 has now become minus 37,500. So producer surplus decreases a lot. So as a result, what happens? Economic surplus comes down. So look for an answer that says either one of the three. Either it says consumer surplus increase, or it says producer surplus decreased, or it says economic surplus decreased. Which one is your answer? Producer surplus at 50 rupees only I looked at. My producer surplus at 50 is only minus 37,500. So which one is that? Economic surplus will fall. Right. There were a few questions because the supply curve cover ABC, therefore you took ABC. No, so the area below the supply curve is what we call the total variable cost. Lamai. We learned that a little somewhere. I don't know if you have missed that part. Producer surplus at price 50 is what I calculated, 37,500. What is producer surplus fall is small. It won't be small, Lamai. Based on this, it will even become negative. Does this always happen in generosity? It depends. It depends on what is generosity. So don't just memorize that this happens. If consumer surplus decrease, consumer surplus is not decreasing. Consumer surplus is increasing. Consumer surplus is increasing. Producer surplus is falling a lot. That's what is happening. Can't we say supply increase? No, supply is increasing. At half a price, they're selling whatever that the producers can list. Yes, that's how the equation is made. But random, but the books in the background. This is what my wife has. She has a bookstore. Some of it is mine, some of it is hers in her bookstore. The books in the background. Then the total revenue is 15,500. Yes. Slightly explain the variable cost. Variable cost part is Lamai, the supply curve below, the area below your supply curve is what you call your variable cost. Remember that. No, supply doesn't shift. How did we take TVC as producer surplus? I never said TVC is producer surplus. Producer surplus is total revenue minus total variable cost. Total variable cost is different, producer surplus is different. So here, total revenue minus total revenue. In both situations, that's what I did. How can consumer surplus be negative? I never said consumer surplus is negative. My consumer surplus is increasing. Please listen. Which area is producer surplus? I can't show Lamai because producer surplus is a negative area here. I can't show you producer surplus in the diagram. Okay. PS isn't like a subsidy. No. How can consumer surplus be negative? Consumer is not negative. Why isn't the small triangle part produce surplus? Because my produce surplus is the difference between what the producer minimum expects and what he actually gets. So he's now the small triangle part could have been producer surplus if he was selling, let's say, for example, if he was selling, let's say, 500 units. And then it could have been produced, that small triangle. But he's not selling 1,005, he's not selling 500, he's selling the entire big quantity. He's selling 1,005. So you can't take that. Produce surplus plus total variable cost is total revenue. Correct. Okay. Right. I will leave it there, Lamai. For the people who got it, fine. For the ones who didn't get it, Poddak take some time, Lamai. It's an interesting question that you can learn from. The people who have memorized things, Lama, you will get stuck over here. This is where you memorize the producer surplus equation, you memorize the consumer surplus equation, and then you get stuck in a question like this. If you know the logic behind how this both of it works, then you will get. Fine? Right. Then going to the next one. They've given the market demand and supply equations. They've said the equilibrium price is 65. They're asking you, what is the value of consumer surplus? Why did I take 150? 150, that's the number that I figured out, right? To supply 1,500 units, let's say they're expecting 150. You can get the answer without the diagram, thinking practically, yes, but then your practical knowledge has to be very, very good. Okay, so they've given Lamai the equilibrium price as 60 here. Price they're saying is 60, sorry, 65. They're asking you for consumer surplus. So can you first find, Lamai, how much will the equilibrium quantity be? Put the 65 to the demand equation and tell me how much is the quantity. 180 minus 2 into 65. How much is the equilibrium quantity? That is 50, right? Then how much is the maximum demand price, Lamai? Price when QD equals 0. So 180 minus 2P, when QD is 0, what is the price? That is 90. Okay. Then you have all the information that you need. Now you can find this. How much is that? Half into base into height is 90 minus 65. That is 25, no? 625. Good. Okay, these are very easy questions. You just have to find the equilibrium quantity, find the maximum demand price, put to the equation, you can get your answer. Consumer surplus increases by surplus. I never said consumer surplus increases by 37,500. Consumer surplus, I didn't even calculate numbers. It's not sure if it increases by the same amount, but it might be different. Maybe my numbers might not be the perfect numbers, Lamai. Don't worry too much about my numbers there. My numbers might not be the perfect. I just put up a few numbers here and there just to show you the producer surplus total. Okay. Right. How do I get 90 Lamai? That's the maximum demand price. That is the price when QD equals 0. So QD is 180 minus 2P. When your QD is 0, what is the price? So you work around, you will get price equals 90. Okay, these are the basics of basics. If you're struggling with this Lamai, you have never calculated a consumer surplus ever before. With 6 months to go, if you have never calculated consumer surplus ever before, then that's a problem. Okay. Right. 2021. Question number 8. They're asking you, suppose the market for avocado faces two simultaneous events. There is a severe drought affecting the supply of avocado. Findings of a research reports that avocado contains medicinal properties which may help avoid cancer. How will these two events affect the market equilibrium price and quantity in the avocado market? Same thing as before. No? So avocado, menna demand, menna supply. Let's say price of avocado is 100 rupees. People bought 1,000 avocados. Now they are saying there is a drought affecting the supply. So drought can lamai, will the supply increase or decrease then? Common sense. If there is a drought, supply will decrease, right? Then my supply will come down. Then also they are saying finding of a research reported that avocado contains medical properties that will help avoid cancer. That means the favorable consumer taste now. People think if you eat avocado, no cancer. That means the demand will increase. So if the demand increases and the supply decreases, Lamai, what happens? The equilibrium price, for sure, it will go up. Okay, equilibrium price for avocados will go up. But what about the quantity? Quantity. Based on what I have drawn, my quantity remains unchanged. Total surplus is economic surplus. In the question, have they said that the supply is changing a lot, demand is changing a little? Nothing like that, right? So quantity, again, is indeterminate. You can't really say what happens to quantity. Price will increase, quantity is indeterminate. The same thing, Lama, they have been testing in different ways. If you're still not getting it, then there's a problem on your side. Right, 2021, the next one, question 9. Suppose the market for good X is currently in equilibrium. What's in the case when I draw and see both increase? Then you have drawn it. Yes, shift if you shift both of this by the same equal proportion, the quantity has to remain unchanged. But they have not told you anywhere in the question it's changing by equal proportion. No, demand is changing more, supply is changing more. They have not told. So then you can draw so many situations now. For example, okay. For the last time, for those who are still getting this confused, supply is decreasing, demand is increasing, right? So supply is coming down, demand is rising. Now, let's say, Lamai, the demand and supply changes by the same proportion. That is what I have drawn here in the screen. So if it changes by the same proportion, then the price will increase, quantity is constant. Let's say demand is increasing more. Demand increases a lot, supply falls a little. Right? Supply I'm shifting a little, demand I'm increasing a lot. Then what happens? Price increases, quantity will also increase because initial quantity was this. So then price increase, quantity also increase. Now, what if supply increases more? Supply decreases more. If the supply decreases more and the demand increases only a little, now you have equilibrium over here. Now your quantity has come down, price has gone up. So price has gone up, quantity has come down. So in all the three situations, my price will go up. If it changes equally, quantity is constant. If demand has increased more, quantity would have gone up. If supply has decreased more, quantity would have gone down. But in the question, nowhere they are saying that this is changing equally or demand is increasing more or supply is decreasing more. They haven't told. That's why the quantity we can't say. It can either increase, decrease, or remain constant. That's why we say quantity is indeterminate. But price for sure we know, no matter what happens, price is increasing. That's the point that you have to get, Laman. It's the same thing now we have been doing so many times. You're still getting this wrong means either you have memorized something so bad that you can't think of the logic or you're not listening. Okay? Right. Suppose the market for good X is currently in equilibrium. Which of the following events would not cause a decrease in both the equilibrium price and quantity? So again, draw and see that. Would not cause a decrease in equilibrium price and quantity. So we'll draw one by one. So I'll draw 5 diagrams first. Demand, supply, equilibrium price, quantity. For answer number 2, it's quantity, demand, supply, equilibrium price, quantity, demand, supply, equilibrium price, quantity, demand, supply, equilibrium price. Okay. We'll draw and see. First one, increase in the price of good Y, which is a complement for good X. So if the complementary price increase, what happens? The demand for your good will come down. Then what will happen? Equilibrium price comes down, quantity comes down. So this can't be our answer. We're looking for answer that does not cause this. Second one, a decrease in the price of good X, which is a substitute. If the substitute price comes down, again, demand for your good will come down, price will come down, quantity will come down. Can't. Third one, decrease in consumer income. Same, consumer income comes down again, demand will decrease, price will come down, quantity will come down. No. Then, yeah, simple terms, what doesn't decrease demand? Increase in consumer income for an inferior good. Inferior good, if income increases, again, demand will come down. Then price will come down, this one will come down. The last one, increase the number of buyers. If the number of buyers increase, demand will increase. Then price will increase, quantity will increase. So that has to be your answer. You don't have to draw all the phi. If you figure out if demand decreases, then this will happen. So answer 1, 2, 3, and 4 all talks about demand decreasing. Then that can't be your answer. Answer number 5 says demand will increase. So then equilibrium price and quantity will go. Ideally, you can draw and figure out, but you can be much more fast as well when getting the answer. Okay, 21. They've given a table And they're saying you can draw now. It won't take that long to draw. In 2 minutes, you can draw. Not an issue. Suppose the supply of green leaves fall by 60 kilos at all prices due to increase in transport cost. What's the new equilibrium? So supply falls by 60 at all prices. So 310 minus 60, 250. Then here 240, 230, 220, 210. So now compare the demand with the new quantity supplied and see where are those two equal. Where are those two equal? See? 240, 240 at the price of 50. So that is your answer. At the price of 55, that's your new equilibrium quantity. Sorry, new equilibrium price. Previous one answer was 5. Right? Okay. Then am I coming to the latest 2 papers that we have? We have around another latest 3 papers. There's a lot, no? Okay. Okay. Latest papers have a lot of questions from market equilibrium. Consider that a consumer spent his or her income on the purchase of 2 goods, X and Y. If consumer's income and prices of good X and Y both double, other things remain unchanged, the consumer will. Think, Lamai. There was a consumer, he was earning, let's say, 1,000 rupees. He was buying good X and good Y. Let's say good X was 100 rupees, good Y was 50 rupees. Now what has happened? Now his income has doubled to 2,000, but the prices of goods have also doubled. That's what they're saying. What will happen, Lamai? Product logical common sense. It will double the purchase of good X and good Y, buy more of good X and less of Y. Question is not there in the paper. Sorry. Question 5 is there. Sorry, did I put the wrong question? Never mind. We'll discuss this and then go to question 5. Okay. Right. Which one? Buy less of this. Ideally should be number 5, right? They will buy the same amount of good X and Y as before. Prices have doubled. So then, if income has also doubled, it doesn't really make a difference. Consumers' purchasing power remains the same. Sorry, 2022, you said question number 5, no? Let me do that as well. Not this. Second. Okay. You said question 5 was the one missing. 2022. Okay, this one. So they're saying last year, 15 million tons of corn were sold at 30,000, and this year 15 million were sold at 25,000. Wasn't that the same thing that we did before, Lamine? So now they're saying corn. Earlier they said some other example, no? They're saying last year 15 million tons were sold at 30,000. Now this year, oops, where did that go? This year they are selling 25,000. Sorry, 15,000. This year, 15 million are sold at 25,000. So how do you go to equilibrium at this point, Lamai? Demand has to come down, supply has to increase. So demand decrease, supply increase. Which one is your answer? Answer number 3. So same thing, they will repeat here and there. Now the same thing they can change it the other way around as well. Okay, done. Where were we? Coming back. Okay. 2022 question number 8. They're saying, assume that good X and Y are complements. What will be the effect on equilibrium price and quantity of good X if an increase in the supply of good Y while other things remain constant? So there is good Y. Okay. Lamai, if the now this is good Y, no, this is the price of good Y, quantity of good Y. Now what has happened, Lamai? The supply of good Y has increased. When the supply of good Y increased, Lamai, what will happen to the price of good Y? Price of good Y will decrease, right? So good Y is a complementary good. The price of the complementary good has come down. Why? Something would have happened, so their supply would have increased. Maybe good Y cost of production went down, or technology got better. Somehow, price of good Y has come down now. So if the price of good Y comes down, what happens to good X now? That's what they're asking. This is the demand and supply for good X. What happens? Complementary good price comes down, Kianne. What happens to the demand for your good? Complementary good price has gone down. Now the demand for your good will increase. No? So as a result, what happens? Anna, your price might increase, your quantity will also increase. So equilibrium price for good X will increase, equilibrium quantity will also increase. So logically, you have to be able to connect them. They're talking about two different goods. They're saying the supply of good Y, that's a complementary good. Now, for example, let's say data will, okay, let's say my classes and data. Good Y is data. Okay. So let's say number of suppliers have gone up. Let's say a Indian firm like Jio or someone, they also have entered the Sri Lankan market and they're also giving data now, telecommunication. So as a result, supply will increase. So if the supply increase, then overall data prices will come down. Now, if the data prices come down, they're asking you, what will happen to my class? So if the data prices come down, what will happen? Demand for my classes will rise. Complementary good has become cheap, demand will rise. So if the demand rises, what happens? You can draw and see equilibrium price increases, quantity increases. How many of you got that correct? That's again a good question to connect a lot of things. Yes. Good. Very few. Then the next one. Demand and supply equations are given. They're asking you for the total surplus at equilibrium. Total surplus can be economic surplus. So can you quickly give me the numbers? I'm not going to do the numbers for you. How much is the equilibrium price and quantity in this question? Equilibrium price. Equate the demand and supply equation and get me. But if consumers now don't want to buy both goods since complement price has increased. Complement price has not increased. Complementary price has decreased. Your price has increased. Okay. So price is 8, quantity is 24, based on what you all are saying, right? How much is the maximum demand price? Price when QD equals 0. Take the demand equation, 0, you get 20. Okay. Maximum demand price is 20. How much is the minimum supply price? Price when QS equals 0. That is a 5. Okay, so now you have all the information. So this is consumer surplus. This is producer surplus. You calculate at both together, you get total economic surplus. So if you want, you can find the entire triangle here because it's MCQ, but don't do that for essay question. So consumer surplus is half into base into height is 20 minus 8, that is 12. How much is that? 144. Producer surplus is half into base is 24, height is 8 minus 5, that is 3. That is how much? 36. Then 144 plus 36, your total economic surplus, total surplus is 180. Answer number 3. These are easy questions, Lamai, but a lot of work to do though. You have to find the equilibrium price, find the quantity, find the maximum demand price, find the minimum supply price. You do all of that. Now you can use a bit of a shortcut, Lamai. Again, not for paper 2. To find maximum demand price, minimum supply price, there is a shortcut. I'm guessing most of you all know this. How many of you all know the shortcut? Instead of taking the whole demand equation and putting 0 for QD and doing all of that to find maximum demand price, there's a shortcut to find. The shortcut is, Lamai, you take your A component divided by your B component. That's the shortcut. Use that for MCQs. A divided by B. So A component is 40, B is 20. So, sorry, B is 2. 40 divided by 2, you get 20. Please don't go and use that for paper 2. MCQs you can use. Ignore the positive and negative signs. Just take the numbers only. Same thing with supply. Ignore the positive, negative signs. Just take the number. Take the number 40, you divide by 8. So 40 divided by 8, you get 5. So that's how you can find the maximum demand price and minimum supply price there. In part of maximum price method, they will have answers. They can allocate marks for that. Okay. Done. So 2022 is done with that. Then a question before to explain. All right, I'll complete, Lama. If you missed it, I'll complete at the end because I'm guessing most of you all got it, but just a very few. Okay, so this one. They're saying the demand and supply equations are given. If the price of orange is at 100, there will be a what? So then Lama, calculate and see at 100 rupees, how much is your QD? 600 minus 5 into 100. So 5 into 100 is 500. 600 minus 500 is 100. How much is the QS? Minus 240 plus 3 into 100. That is 300 minus 240. That is 60. So there is an excess demand or excess supply. Demand is 100. Supply is only 60. There is a excess demand. Excess demand of how many units? There is an excess demand of 40 units. So which one is your answer then? Answer number 1. Yeah, these are very easy, straightforward questions. You are struggling here, you have to work a little hard. Done. Then this one. If both demand and supply increase simultaneously, same thing, I need the 4th or 5th time that we are doing. What happens, Lamai? If demand and supply both increase simultaneously, we know the quantity will definitely increase, but price we can't say. Price might increase, it might decrease, it might remain unchanged. So quantity will increase, price could rise or fall. What is your answer, Lamai? 3. Price could rise or fall, but quantity will increase. Same thing. We've done this multiple times. The next one, in a competitive market, economic surplus is maximized when? When is your economic surplus the highest? When quantity supplied equals quantity demand, when quantity supplied exceeds quantity demand, when quantity demand exceeds quantity supplied, when the price is set below the equilibrium, when the price is set above the equilibrium. When you think, Lama, your economic surplus is maximized, economic surplus can consume, produce, or both of them. Ideally, it would be in a situation where when you're at equilibrium, no? Unless like there is like a government purchasing the excess supply and let's say deficiency payment, maybe there, but none of those are there in this. No? So in all of this, right, where will the economic surplus be maximized? When you're at equilibrium. So consumer gets this, producer gets this. So you can go with answer number 1. Previous question answer was 3. Done. Okay, now we come to the latest paper. Okay, that is the 2024 paper question number 8. Suppose good X and Y are substitutes. What will be the effect on equilibrium price and quantity of good X of an increase in supply of good Y? Isn't that the same thing that you had before also? So you had good Y, right? Now the supply of good Y has increased. So if the supply of good Y increased, Lamai, what will happen to the price of good Y? Price of good Y. Price of good Y will come down. So good Y price has now come down. Now, earlier example, it was a complementary good. Now it is a substitute. So what has happened, Lamai? The price of your substitute has come down. If the price of your substitute comes down, then what happens to your good? This is the demand and supply for your good. What happens to your good, Lamai? What happens to your demand? If your substitute has become cheaper, what happens to demand for your good now? Demand for your good will start to come. As a result, what happens to your equilibrium price? What happens to your equilibrium? If demand for your good comes down, your equilibrium price will decrease. Your quantity will also decrease. Answer number 2. See, same thing how they changed it around, Lama. Previous paper, they talked of the same thing, but they said the two goods are complementary. Here also they are telling the same thing, but they are saying the two goods are essential. So you have to logically be able to connect. Previous one was one. Guys, if you all missed the previous one, I put that check in the past paper book, right? That you all have. Otherwise, I had to go up and down. Okay. Then this question 9. Suppose a new technology has been introduced to the production of good X, which is sold in a competitive market. If the new technology reduces production cost, what is the impact on consumer and producer surplus? Draw and see, Lamai. So this is the demand and the supply. Okay. Right now, this yellow area is consumer surplus. This green area is producer surplus. Now they are saying a new technology has come. As a result, cost of production has gone down. Then you should know, Lamai, supply would have increased. Yeah, supply would have increased. So now what happens? Now you have a new price at this level. So now your consumer surplus will become, Lamai, this will go until here. So consumer surplus, you can figure out that it has increased. What do you think has happened to producer surplus, Lamai? Based on the areas, the price he is getting might have fallen a little, but in terms of the quantity that he is getting, quantity kind of has increased. No? Overall, if you look at my picture, it looks like the produce surplus increase, but we can't 100% say, but we look at the answers though. Okay, we'll see. Produce surplus will increase, but consumer surplus will decrease. Strong consumer surplus will increase. Consumer surplus will increase, but produce surplus will decrease. You can't say that. Both consumer and produce surplus will increase. Okay, looks fine. Both consumer will decrease. No. Consumer surplus will increase, but produce surplus will be not affected. Which one do you think, Lamai? Is it 2, 3, or 5? Consumer surplus, for sure, you can see when supply increases, price goes down, this will go up. What about the producer surplus? Does it remain unaffected? Does it increase? Does it decrease? Based on my diagram, it looks like it has become bigger, no? If you take producer surplus before it is this red color triangle. Now, it's this black color thing. By the looks of it, it looks like it has gone up. So you can say both consumer and producer surpluses can increase. Can someone confirm, Lamai, the answer that is there in the back of the, I don't know, if you'll have the marking scheme? Does it also say 9.3? Yes, 2024, question number 9. I remember there was a, you had, let me check if anyone doing so it have 3, no? Fine, right. Okay, fine. So a question like that, Lamai, yeah, you can try with a few numbers as well. Perfect. All, Lamai, if you realized, most of these questions is about drawing and figuring out, no? If you can draw and figure it out, you can get these MCQs done. No, you don't have to see with the old supply curve. If the supply increases, it shifts to the right. Then you look at the new one. It's that in the tax and subsidy, you change. You look at with the old one. Okay. No, produce surplus will not decrease. Produce surplus will increase them. So it has to be number 3. Okay, how did you all do out of all of this? That's it with the MCQs. We'll quickly do the essay questions also. There is essay questions, not much though. There's only like 5 or 6. How did you all do? Yes, consumer surplus will increase. Now, how are you asking how come consumer surplus will increase? When you draw and saw, you saw that. This is consumer surplus before, this red color one. Now, after the supply increase, price will come down, quantity will go up. So now consumer surplus becomes this entire thing. It has increased. Okay. Right. How did you all do out of this? I think there are 30 questions in total. How much out of 30? Tax I'll come to why we work with all supply when we come to tax. At least 1/3 of it, at least 20 out of 30 should be a good enough mark. You've at least got around 20 out of 30. To get that, you have to first do the questions and come. Otherwise, you can't get it done. Okay. So we take a small break, Lamai, and then we'll go to the essay questions. Essay questions, we don't have a lot actually. We only have around 6, 7 essay questions. But I think good to have a small break just to get some water and come. Half an hour, I will finish off. So we'll take a break. It's 8:57. You can take a break until 9:05 and then come back by around 9:30-ish. I will be able to wrap it off. Take a break and come. Okay, so we'll start Lama with the essay questions. There are not a lot of questions, so probably in around a half an hour, we should be able to finish it off. So starting with 2014 A levels, question number 3, subsection 4. Interesting question. The question is saying, for an equilibrium in the free market, the minimum quantity supplied should be less than the maximum quantity demanded. Explain this statement using a diagram. Okay. Now, how does this work? If you are to draw a diagram. Now, for questions like this, for a proper diagram itself, they'll give you around 2 marks out of the 5. Okay. Now, this is your demand curve. This thing is what we call the maximum quantity demanded. This is what you call the maximum quantity demanded. When the price is 0, how much is the QD? Then you have the minimum quantity supplied. So if you draw your supply curve, this is what you call your minimum quantity supply. That is, when the price is 0, how many units will they supply? Now, usually, if the minimum quantity supplied is less than the maximum quantity demand, maybe in this example, for example, let's say maximum quantity demand is 100 units, minimum quantity supplied is 20 units. So if it is a situation like this, Anna, you will have equilibrium. But what if your supply curve is not this? What if your supply curve was something like this? Your minimum quantity supplied is, let's say, 120. When the price is 0, consumers are willing to supply, let's say, 120 units. But, sorry, producers are willing to supply 120. But this happens over here. So, in a situation like this, you will not have equilibrium, no? That is what they're asking. So, you need to explain this, So, you need to say, look here, this is your diagram that you will draw. Okay? You draw the diagram and say, look here, if the minimum quantity supplied is less than the maximum quantity demanded, Anna, you will have equilibrium. But however, if the minimum quantity supplied is much greater, right? If the minimum quantity supplied is much more, Anna, then there is no equilibrium. No? So draw the diagram and see. Maybe you can label this as, let's say, S2. So you can say in a situation where the supply curve is S2, where the minimum quantity supplied is greater than the maximum quantity demand, there will not be equilibrium. So you have to draw and explain that. That's what you have to do. That's the question there. It's a very interesting, nice practical type of a question that you have. Now, then going to the next one. 2015 A-levels question number 2, they've given a demand and supply equation. They ask you to calculate equilibrium price and quantity and show this on a graph. So here, you'll have to draw a graph paper. You'll have to draw it on a graph paper. You'll have to take a proper scale. Now, can you all calculate the equilibrium price and quantity for me? Now, that part I don't have to do it, Nilamai. Can you all do that for me? QD equals QS. 100 minus 4P is equal to minus 30 plus 6P. So if you work it around, how much do you get for price? How much do you get for cost? So equilibrium price is 13. Okay. Price is 13. How much is the quantity? 48. Okay, I'm guessing all of y'all know how to find that, Lamai. That can't be issues. So then write your answer nicely. As a equilibrium price is rupees 13, quantity is 48 units. Now you have to show this on a graph. Now, Lamai, to draw a graph, you have to get a scale. Okay. So always remember, I'll just show you this. When you're drawing this on a graph paper, remember, Lamai, your equilibrium is like the middle point. So that price 13, quantity 48 has to be like the middle point of your graph. Okay. For school term exams, then you'll have to take and go graph paper, if they don't give you. In your A-level paper, they will give you graph papers if you raise your hand and ask. At the very beginning, they will not give you. But if you're doing a question like this, you raise your hand, they will bring and give. Okay, so then how do you do this? So when you're drawing this, taking a scale, now think your equilibrium price is 13. So maybe you can take 2, 4, 6, 8, a reasonable quantity until 20. That looks okay, reasonable. So then maybe in your graph, when you all are drawing, take a scale from 2 to 20. Let's say every 2 boxes or every some box, whatever scale that you're taking, for every 2 boxes or 3 boxes, take, see, maybe 2, 4, 6, maybe if that is too much, maybe go 4, 8, 12, somewhere there. So remember now, if they tell you to show this accurately on a graph, you have to show that on a graph paper. Any rough diagram that you're drawing, you draw it normally, it's okay. Okay. But if you are this thing, okay, so because I'm showing you how to draw on a graph, then you will have to, I don't have a graph paper with me. Okay, you take a graph paper. This you have to practice now. I can't hold your hand and draw the graph for you. So then 0 in terms of the scale. Now the equilibrium price is 13. So take a reasonable scale. Then 13 has to be somewhere like the middle point. So if 13 is like somewhere around here, you figure out where you should go with. So maybe 4, 8, 12, 16 is also okay. 2, 4, 6, 8 is also okay. Anything that based on your graph. Okay, so maybe I'll go with 4, 8 and all of it. So 4, take equal boxes, 12, 16, 20, you take your ruler and draw. And then in terms of the quantity, Lamai, you have two quantities 48. No? So I would go maybe 10, 20, 30, 40. That could have been, or even I can get 12, right? So every, let's say 10 boxes, I can take 12, 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, likewise there. So my equilibrium is somewhere around here, right? 30 and this. That's my equilibrium dot. Now then, you have to draw this line. See, when the price is 0, QD will be 100. So this scale goes until 100 somewhere, right? So for the draw, maximum demand price is 25. So that will be 25 there. So then this will go on from there until 100, right? So you draw a proper diagram, then you got to put the practice that. Then if you take the supply schedule, it starts at minus 30. When the price is 0, QS is minus 30. No need to schedule for this, right? So minus 30 again, it will be somewhere around here. You take a proper scale. Then when the price is 0, how much is the QS? QS is 5. So it will come from here, go like that, and then you'll have to draw it in proper scale. That will go like that. And that is your supply. So I'll just label a few points that you have to find out. One is the equilibrium. Yeah, I'll draw boxes. Other one is this 100 here. How do you get this 100, Lamai? From the demand equation. How do you get this minus 30? From the supply equation. That's the A components of the demand and supply equations. So these boxes you find out, Lamai, you can draw the diagram. Then maximum demand price. How do you get maximum demand price? Price when QD equals 0. And then this will be 5. Minimum supply price. So if you can find those 5 boxes, then you can draw the curve level. So first what you do is find equilibrium price quantity. Yeah, I'll just tell you the steps. Now practice this for homework. Now take another question even and draw and see. So first find the equilibrium price and quantity. Then Lamai reasonably figure out a scale. Now if the equilibrium price is 50, don't take a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe take 5, 10, 15 or 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Reasonably use some common sense there. Then based on the equilibrium price and quantity you find, get a scale. Then what you do is, now Lamai, find those 5 boxes. Equilibrium price quantity, that dot, find the maximum demand price and all of that, supply, then you can draw the diagram Lamai. That's what you have to do. You can draw in pencil, no problem. Pencil is what I will recommend to draw as well. You have to use a graph paper Lamai, because they're saying, okay, already draw this on a graph. They ask for graphs in paper too, then do we need to scale? Yeah, if they tell you draw on a graph Lamai, you have to draw it on a scale. Any rough diagram you draw, it doesn't have to be on a scale. Okay? No need to schedule. For the exam, if there is a question which requires a graph like this, should we request a graph paper? No, you have to request for graph paper. Lamai. You raise your hand and they will tell you. Now, if the question specifically says, show this on a graph, you will request a graph paper and you will take. No, so if it's a paper 2 question, it's like this, Lamai. If your graph is a cut-to-add graph, you don't have to. No scale needed, no graph paper needed. But if the question specifically says show this on a graph, you have to get a graph paper. If the A component supply curve starts from positive, from where is it going to start? So then it starts from the positive. So if your A component was, let's say, plus 30, then it will be from here. Let's say plus 30 is here. That's just supply. Yes, it's about plotting in a graph. That is basic maths. Don't expect me to give you math. For part 2 question, do we have to put it in the equation and show the maximum demand? Better, but even if you don't, that should be okay. Because you will anyway need it for the next part. Produce surplus consumer, you will need it. Rare case for supply. Yeah, it's not a very common question, Lama, so don't worry too much about it also. Okay. Then part B is saying calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus and show that also in the graph. Cut off your marks if it's not in the schedule, that is if they tell you to find equilibrium through the schedule. But here they have given the equation. If they have given the equation and told you to find equilibrium, then you don't have to have a schedule. But without giving a this one, they tell you to find, then you have to. Okay, right. So this is your equilibrium price, that is 13. This is your equilibrium quantity, that is 48. So which area is consumer surplus? That is this green shaded area. Which area is produce surplus? I think minimum supply price is 5. So produce surplus is this blue shaded area. Now you need to find the two areas of this. If you miss anything, Lamai, for a connection issue, I'll come to it after class. Consumer surplus, half into base is 48, height is 25 minus 13. How much do we get, Lamai? Consumer surplus. 48 into 12 into half, 288. 288. Then producer surplus is half into base is 48, height is 13 minus 5. How much do you get? 192. Have they asked for economic surplus? Not needed. If they ask for economic surplus, add the 2 and give 288 plus 192. They have not asked, so individual, that is okay. That's part A and part B. These are easy questions, Lama, not hard. Supply curve is using 5. Minimum supply price is 5, or 30 divided by 6. Yeah. Then the next one, 2019 A-levels question number 2. They've given the demand and supply equation. They're asking for total surplus. See, you saw same MCQ of this as well, right? They asked for total surplus. So how much is the equilibrium price and quantity, Lamai? I'm not going to calculate that for you, but you have to calculate and show those. You get marks for those. How much do we get in this question? Equilibrium price and quantity. Price is 14. Quantity is 80. Okay, so you have to show those workings. You will get marks out of the 4 marks. Then, how much is the maximum demand price? Price when QD equals 0, you get 20. Okay. How much is the minimum supply price? Price when QS equals 0. How much is that? Yes, my battery might die. Okay, that is 5. Okay, so now you have all the information. Now you find, now don't find the big triangle, find separately. How much is consumer surplus? Half into base into what's the height? 20 minus 14. How much do we get? 54. Producer surplus, half into base into what's the height? 14 minus 5. That is it. That's a 81. No, you don't have to show this in a diagram. Right? Diagram is a rough diagram that we draw. Then how much is the total economic surplus? CS plus PS, 135. Fine. Those are very easy questions, Lama. Almost like free marks in your paper. Yeah. Here rough diagram, Lama. This diagram you don't have to draw on a graph paper or anything. That's just a rough diagram for you to, figure that out. Yeah. Right. Then the next one, 2020 A-levels question number 2. Give me a second until I get my charger for this. Okay, so can you give me the answers, Lama? How much is the equilibrium price and quantity for this question? They've given the demand equation, they've given the supply equation. How much is our equilibrium price and quantity? That you all can do, Lama, first part. I think one of the easiest 10 marks that they can ever give in this paper. No? So equilibrium price is 50, quantity is 60. If you get a question like this, you think jump up and wait. So then draw the diagram. Total surplus is economic surplus lamai. So give me the other information as well. Equilibrium price is 50, quantity is 60. How much is the maximum demand price? Price when QD equals 0. So when QD is 0, it's 110. Minimum supply price when QS equals 0, that is 20. Okay. Then with that information, Lama, you can calculate consumer and producer surpluses. So consumer surplus, half into base into height is 110 minus 50. How much do we get? 1800. Then producer surplus, half into base into height is 50 minus 20. How much do we get? 900. Okay. Then economic surplus, 1800 plus the 900, you get a 2000. Very easy question for you to get 4 marks. Okay. Then part C of the question is now asking Lamai. They're asking you calculate the price as a demand of bread at price 60. So then Lamai, at price 60, how much is the QD? QD equals 110 minus P. So if P is 60, how much is that? QD will be equal to 50. Now take the PED equation. PED minus B into price over QD. For minus B, I don't have space. I'll write it on the bottom. PED minus B is how much, Lamai? 0. 0 නෙවෙයි. P කියන්නේ minus. That P කියන්නේ is 1P. So B is minus 1. Minus 1. Price is 60. Quantity is 50. So if you solve this, Lamai, how much do we get? If they ask for total surplus for tax good, no, government doesn't be a part of it. Minus 1.2. Okay, done. That's, I think, one of the easiest 10 marks that you can ever get in your A-level paper. Right? That's half of an entire 20-mark question. If you get a question like that, you think that's your lucky chance. Now, this was the COVID year, no? So they would have made the paper a little easier than normal. Not that they made it very easy, but you can see, you can see the signs of that there. COVID year, students would have found it very difficult to study and all of it. And 10 marks, easy calculation put. Your year, nothing like that. Okay, 2021, question number 3, part 1. Define consumer and producer surplus. 4 marks. So, for 2 marks, you talk about what is consumer surplus. For 2 marks, you talk about what is producer surplus. If the video is 1, you can see yes. So what is consumer surplus, Lavai? Consumer surplus is the difference between what the consumer is willing to pay, and what he actually pays for the quantity bought in the market. For the quantity that he buys, what is he willing to pay and what he actually pays. What he is willing to pay is shown by the demand curve. What he actually pays is that this thing, you don't have to draw a diagram if you want, if you don't need to. So if you want, you can say this would be you can write the equation also if you want, Lamai. Area below the demand curve above the equilibrium price. You can give a small thing like that as well. Then what is producer surplus? That is the difference between what the consumer is expecting, what he minimum expects, and what he actually receives for the quantity sold in the market. You can say this is the area above the supply curve, below the equilibrium price. And if you want, you can write the equation as well, but not needed because they only say define. But you can give the equation, no problem. You can write the equation, but equation can't be half into base into this one. No? Write the proper equation. Graph not needed. If you want, you draw, but not that they are going to give you marks because they're only saying define. Okay, done. Then the next one, the last two questions that we have. Now, something that I put the answer here also, I'm going to show you how they now differentiated the questions. Yeah. Proper equations now I put that check in your tute. So I don't want to write it, you have a tute. The question in the latest two papers, Lamai, they made it interesting. I told you. Now what the examiner is doing, okay, they don't want people to memorize it and go and write now. Now this, like this 10-mark question that you got from the VAS paper, very unlikely you will get a question like this in your paper. Now see, Lamai, they're trying to make it more practical. They're trying to see, can the student logically, do they know this? That's why that memorizing fellows, they are completely screwed. So if you look at the 2023 question and also the 2024 question, not questions that you can do simply by memorizing a theory tute and go and do it. So we'll do the questions and see. 2023, Lamai, they're saying in question number 3, there is one. Explain whether the following statements are true or false. Explain, not just true or false, but explain why is it true or false also. Okay. First one is saying consumer surplus is shown graphically as the area under the demand curve and above the supply curve. No, under the demand curve, but above the equilibrium price, not above the supply curve. So then you will say false, and now you are explaining, Lamai. You are saying here, consumer surplus is graphically the area below the demand curve here, area below the demand curve and above the market price line, that is the equilibrium price line. No? So it represents the difference between the price that the consumers are willing to pay and the actual market price. So under definition for consumer surplus in the previous one. Therefore, it's the area between the demand curve and the price line and not the area above the supply curve and below the demand curve. So they have given a small explanation there as well. So it will be needed. Now, exactly how the marks are broken down, we don't know. Is it half a mark for this and 1.5 marks for this? Or is it 1 mark for this and 1 mark for the explanation? We don't know. This is the original marking scheme that is given. I copied it from the original marking scheme just to show you how your answer should be. So that when they're discussing in the panel and marking, they would have figured that out. So you write a complete definition also. You don't, not compulsory, but you have to prove it. Then the second one, an increase in the market price due to a decrease in supply will increase consumer surplus. If the supply decreases, they are saying, okay, price will increase and consumer surplus will increase. Now picture that and see. If you draw it, I'll draw it over here. If this is this thing, now this triangle is consumer surplus. If the supply reduces and price goes up, now consumer surplus will only be this small red area. Consumer surplus would have fallen. So then it says false because that is wrong. And then they are saying an increase in the market price due to a decrease in supply cannot increase consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the area between the demand curve and the price up to the quantity demand. When the price rises due to a reduced supply, the quantity demand will fall. This results in a decrease in consumer supply. If you want, Lama, you can draw graphically and explain that as well. You should know this will decrease. So those are where, Lama, you have to practically work on your answer writing. Then part C, if the price of a good falls as a result of a decrease in demand, additional producer surplus is generated. If the market price of a good falls as a result of a decrease in demand. Okay, so we'll draw and see. This is the demand and supply. This is the producer surplus right now. Now they are saying there has been a decrease in the demand. So as a result, price is now falling. What will happen to producer surplus? So producer surplus comes down, they are saying it will, an additional producer surplus is generated. No, it will decrease, not an additional one will generate. So then again, you say false. If the market price for a good falls as a result of this, additional producer surplus cannot be generated. What is producer surplus? And then they say, when demand decreases, price will fall and producers are not willing to supply the same quantity. Producer surplus will come down. Now that is where Lama, these are the type of questions that I want you all to be prepared for, right? And especially in our mock exam series, right, which we will start in August after we do the fast track. The questions there Lama, will be of this type. It will be hard. You all will start wondering what on earth did I even learn. So we will prepare for the hardest of questions and go. In your paper, Lamai, some of it can be hard. These are not hard, but these are not that very general type of questions that you have been getting. So you can be prepared. You should be prepared for something like this. I will prepare you and send you, but on your end, you will have to do a lot of work as well. Then the last paper, the 2024 paper. In this paper, they are saying, Namai, define the concept of market equilibrium and explain the forces that drive a market disequilibrium towards equilibrium. They're asking you what is equilibrium, and they're asking you if there is disequilibrium, how does it go to equilibrium? Look at how the answer is this from the original marking scheme again. They're saying, Lamai, market equilibrium situation where the quantity demand is equal to the quantity supplied at a particular price. At this point, the market is in balance. There is no tendency for the price to increase or decrease. And they have for 2 marks this first part of the question, concept of market equilibrium. Done. Now they are saying, what will cause the market disequilibrium to go towards equilibrium? Now, what is disequilibrium? Disequilibrium is a situation where either you have an excess supply, that is where your quantity supplied is more than quantity demand, that is disequilibrium, or your quantity demand is more than quantity supply, that is also disequilibrium. So in a situation like this, how does the market go to equilibrium? That's what they're asking you. So picture this, in a situation of excess supply, how does the market go to equilibrium level? When there is so much of supply, but people are willing to buy less, how does the market go to equilibrium? What happens to the price in the market then? When there is so much of tomato in the market, but people want to buy only very little, what happens to the price of tomato? That's price mechanism, Lamai. What will happen to the price of tomato now? The rationing function. What happens? The price will start to come down now, no? If there is an excess supply, there is so much of a good, but there is very little demand. What happens? When there is an excess supply, Lamai, the price will start to come down. When the price comes down, the QS will, when the price comes down, the QS will come down, the QD will increase, law of demand, law of supply. The market goes into equilibrium. And that is what you are writing here in this paragraph. Here, see, they say excess supply occurs when the price of the good is above equilibrium, leading to quantity supplied being greater than quantity demand. There's excess supply. Okay. Producers are left with unsold goods. Excess supply can, you have a lot of goods that you can't sell, creating a downward pressure on price. That's what I'm saying. Price will go down. To clear the surplus, sellers will lower prices, causing an increase in the quantity demand. So when you reduce price, Lamai, quantity supplied will come down, quantity demand will go up. That excess supply will start vanishing off. You get into equilibrium. So automatically market will move to that. Same thing happens the other way around. If you're in a situation where you have an excess demand, so excess demand can, your price is now below equilibrium. Now what happens? Now there's so many people who want to buy your good, but the supply is very less. What happens to price now, Lamai? When there's so many fellows who want to buy your good, so many people want to buy, but there is not much of a supply. Now the price will start rising. So when the price rises under law of supply, supply will increase its supply. What will happen to the quantity demanded? Consumers will reduce their demand, and the market goes into equilibrium. And that's what you have explained in this paragraph. Here they are saying excess demand occurs when the price is below the equilibrium, leading to QD being greater than QS. Consumers compete for the limited supply, creating an upward pressure on the price. Now, there is so much of consumers who want to buy, but very little supply. So then price starts to go up. Then what happens? Sellers will raise prices, causing a decrease in the quantity demand and increase in the quantity supplied. This process continues until the market price reaches equilibrium, eliminating the short. So that's how automatically demand and supply vanishes when you have automatically how the disequilibrium goes off. So a market will always move towards equilibrium. Now, for example, if I am charging, let's say 20,000 a month for you as class fees, I am willing to supply for 500 students. But let's say only 10 people will come to my class. Then I will realize, no point, I will reduce price. Now, if I'm charging only 1,000 rupees as class fees, I realize so many people want to come. There's excess demand. Then I will increase price. So automatically you will come to a particular price that is there, Lamai. That's how the markets work. Okay, done. Right, that's all that we have with the equilibrium section. So with that, Lama, unit 2 is done. I want you to take some time to go through the questions properly, learn from it, Lama. There is no point just taking class and looking at my face, but I'm glad that you came to class. See where you went wrong, see what are the mistakes you made, see what are the points that you can learn from. And then next time a question like that comes, you will probably do it much, much better. That's all I have in my tute. Are there any more questions, Lama? There are two more questions. Sorry. Okay, let me go back to the tute. If there is more questions, we can discuss. Hold on. Okay, this one is a last one. No, 5-1. I'm sorry. So define consumer surplus, produce surplus. That's the same thing as before, Lamai. Okay. Same thing as before. You can write the same answer. Then the last part B is saying, using diagrams, explain how the PED affects consumer surplus. So you can draw and show. So you can say this is what consumer surplus is. Remember, we had a MCQ also testing that. So if the this is consumer surplus. Now, if the demand is elastic, then what happens? Consumer surplus will reduce. If demand is inelastic, right? If it's a inelastic demand curve, then consumer, this one will be much higher. You can also say if PED is perfectly elastic, then consumer surplus is 0. If it's perfectly inelastic, consumer surplus is infinity. So you can say the higher the inelasticity, higher the consumer surplus. And you can explain. So in your words, giving a answer, draw some diagrams. All they're saying using diagrams. So draw a few diagrams. Show if it is inelastic, how does it look like? If it's elastic, how does it look like? Then say perfect elastic now and the consumer surplus is 0. That we had in MCQ also. So use those knowledge and write your answer there. Is that okay? Fine. Done. Okay. Expert demand price, use our price. Yeah. Okay. So with that, Lama, we'll call it off. If you all have any questions, problems, and issues, stay and clarify. See you. Bye bye.